I'm Mike Rankin with Relational Intelligence, and today I want to talk about something that is on a lot of people's minds, like millions and millions of people across the country, and that is the topic of caregiving and caring for a loved one. And I have with me Sam Cradduck, and Sam is not only an expert in the field, but just a big heart and a great lady, so welcome.
Thank you.
So Sam, we were just talking a minute ago about, sort of the magnitude of the issue. But before we get into that, maybe just share a little bit about kind of who you are and your background and what you do.
So by degree, I'm a gerontologist, but I'm a caregiver at heart. And so as a caregiver, I've done a lot of care for family members. I've done a lot of care professionally. And I now speak and teach other caregivers and other family members how to navigate the world that they found themselves in.
Yeah, and it's not a world that many of us are trained for.
Oh, no.
We're ill-equipped and ill-prepared.
Very ill-equipped. So we actually call our training side more than heart, because as family members, you have that heart to get in there and dive in and do it, but you don't have the skills and the understanding of what's going on. So it takes more than heart to provide dignity and respect and care. Wow. And so we're trying to bring that understanding, some of the skills, because caregiving has skill sets, but just more of the understanding of what your loved one's going through and see it through their eyes, so then you're better equipped to give them the right care and the right level of care.
And I find, when I first heard that, I thought, what an incredible perspective, because so many of us, I'll speak for, my age and my age group in the mid-50s, right? And we're watching our parents turn, 70 and 80 and, God willing, even higher numbers than that. And I think that we always, I'll speak for myself, I just look at it through my own lens, right?
Sure.
And I tend not to say, okay, well, Mike, let's just put you over here for a second and let's think about how mom is looking at this.
Exactly.
So how do you do that? How do you help somebody sort of have that empathy?
Right. How do you get out of your own lens? How do you stop seeing it just as I'm the kid that's having to give up some of my retirement or some of my personal time with my family, with my spouse, with my vacations? How do you see it from the perspective of mom or dad are aging and they've lost their abilities and they're grieving the life they thought they were going to have? Because the thing about us is we don't view aging with limitations. All of us seem to think that we're just going to grow older and we're going to be the same person.
The same all the way through, right?
And it's just going to stay the same. But the reality is we're kind of like that frog in the hot water, and that flame's getting turned up and it's slow boil. Right. So we in our mid-50s accept that we're more limited than we were when we were in our 20s and when we were in our 30s.
But it stops here, right?
But it stops here. We don't see that progressing on through. So we never view ourselves being reliant on Mobies and walkers and canes and other assisted devices just to ambulate. And so we can't put ourselves in those shoes. But they didn't see themselves there either.
Sure.
So they're going, what the hell happened? Why does it hurt when I stand up?
Yeah.
Why do I pee myself when I stand up? Why? And so they're dealing with all of that. And when you sit back and you go, wait a minute, I'm headed there too. And this is going to suck when I get there.
Yeah.
It's going to suck when I can't go out and garden because my back hurts or my knees hurt. It's going to suck when I have to ask somebody to help me take a shower. Because I say it. How many of us woke up and said, I can't wait to get naked in front of a stranger today.
Right.
It's not in our, it's just not the first thing where I can't wait for my adult child to come over and shower me. And so when you start looking at it through their lens and you're like, whoa, that sucks. Then you can start going, you know what, Mom, Dad, this is hard, but we're going to make it through it together.
Right.
And you can give that empathetic approach to it, and then by doing so, you're giving that dignity and that respect that they deserve.
It probably also is a little relief, too, for the caregiver to say, hey, it's okay, I'm going to help you through this, as best we all can.
Right.
Yeah.
And help them, but don't take over. And I think
Yes.
that's what we all want to do. We all want to go in and we want to rescue them. You know what? You're not going to rescue them. They're going to continue to age. We're going to continue to decline. All of us are going there. So you can't rescue them. So don't take away what they can do.
Yeah.
And
What are some of the areas where you see some people moving in and taking things away maybe prematurely almost, right?
yeah, so a big one is, we all recognize now, more so than we did when we were younger, healthy eating, nutrition, things like that. And so, mom's been drinking coffee for the last 65 years every single morning, but because the cardiologist said mom has high blood pressure or mom had a heart attack, all of a sudden the kids want to sweep in and take the coffee cup away.
Sure.
And it's like, wait a minute, why are you taking away? Life takes away enough.
Yeah.
If you want to eat pie for dinner, eat pie for dinner. Because there's going to be times where I'm just going to have popcorn myself, Mom, and it's okay.
Yeah.
But we tend to think that if we take control, we're going to keep them longer.
Right.
We're going to make them healthy again. And the reality is that's not what our job is.
Right.
That's not what they want from us. And so you start having a resistance and you start seeing a clash in those relationships because the kids are trying to take on a role that they shouldn't be in, which is governing and controlling their parent.
Yeah.
And we're going to fight like hell to govern and control our kids as parents.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if it's just an American culture trait where we think that we can go in and fix everything, and and yet we're kind of blind to the trajectory that maybe mom and dad are
Right.
on.
Well, I think it's human nature is we're fixers. We don't like to not be able to fix it. If we can't fix it, we throw it away and we buy something new.
Yeah.
And we can't fix this. We can't fix the aging process. And so we have to recognize that, there's some things we can do to make it last longer, be healthier, age better. There's some things that we can do, but we do those now. We do those in our youth. We don't do those. You don't typically change a lifestyle in your 80s and 90s and
Right.
gain 10 or 15 more years.
Right.
The damage is usually already done.
Yeah, right. You gain 7 seconds.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And so is 7 seconds of misery worth not having a cigarette the rest of your life if you've
Right.
been a long time smoker?
Yeah.
Heavens no, it's
Right.
not. Your kids just think it is.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things that, since listening to you talk, and just thinking about even in my own situation, which I'm not fully in caregiving yet, right?
Right.
I mean, mom's still, she's walking in the morning and doing all of her stuff, which is awesome. But for many of us, there are so many layers to the emotions. I mean, I could be a situation where maybe I live close to mom or dad and my siblings don't, or vice versa. Or maybe one sibling has more financial means than another, and some are checked out, some are really engaged.
Right.
How does one kind of manage that individually, and even maybe what are the resources that are out there that can help with that?
So lots of times we see sibling conflict. We see that one sibling that stands up and steps up, and they're the one that's going to be the caregiver, and then the other siblings just kind of stay back.
Right.
And so it creates a lot of conflict. It creates a lot of frustration for the one that's doing it.
Resentment.
A lot
sometimes.
of resentment.
Yeah.
And what I try and tell people is you can't change your siblings. You're only responsible for what you do.
That's good.
And so love them in spite and appreciate that you're getting time that they're never going to have. And hope that it doesn't cause them to regret that later.
Yes. I've seen
Because
that
they
too.
may. I've seen that. I've
Yep.
seen that so many times where you get all this time and then they stay away and then all of a sudden mom or dad passes and they're like,
Oh, gee, I wish
I thought I had longer.
And for the one who was, carrying the burden, they're like, well, I told you everything that was
We've
happening.
been telling you that
Right.
this wasn't, it wasn't
Yeah.
going to last forever. And so I think we have to back ourselves up enough to say, you know what? I'm responsible for me. I'm responsible for how I treat this situation.
Yeah.
And I've got to do the best I can do by our parents. And if you can't, that's okay.
Yeah.
That's not your calling. That's
Right.
not your gift. That's not your trade. Do you got some pennies you can throw in the bank
Right.
to help
Little
with this
something.
because it's a
Yeah.
little
Gas money.
expensive?
Yeah.
Yeah, gas money, a little bit on the prescriptions, whatever you can do, and accept that, because I think at the end of the day, are most people trying to do the best they can? Yes.
Yeah.
And some of us run in and we just take it all over, and our other siblings are like, well, I'm not touching that mess.
Sure, right. And even what I've noticed is that sometimes people just process information differently, and some get kind of stuck in a particular mode, and maybe it's not that they don't want to help, they're just not sure, or they're not seeing it, and so I think what I'm hearing from you is give some grace,
Yeah.
both mom and dad and to the siblings in the process. Yeah.
The whole process creates grief. The whole process creates grief. It creates what we call anticipatory grief. That's grieving before someone dies, but grieving the losses that they've already dealt with. And that loss might be my cognitive function. It might be my physical abilities. It might be that vacation that I wanted to go on. All of us are in a grieving state as we're watching our loved ones change. And so they are, and each sibling is, and no one knows how they're going to manage grief.
Yeah.
And so you might be that warrior that can go out there and just throw on the battle clothing, and you're going to jump right in and be the caregiver, ignoring that it's destroying you inside,
Right.
because you're also, you're losing.
Tearing up inside.
Yeah, you're grieving your parent, but your sister or your brother or your siblings, they may not be able to throw on those warrior clothes. They may not be able to step up because it's too overwhelming.
Yeah.
Because that loss is really hitting them in a different way. And we don't know how people are going to respond. We only know how we respond, and we're only accountable for ourselves. So I think that's the best thing you can tell a family member.
Yeah. And I want to get into the sort of the time burden. Obviously, it varies, but the burden for the caregiver. But I was in this conversation the other day, and I was thinking about, why does it feel so different today than a generation or two ago? Do you have insight on that?
So we have developed ourselves into an instant society. We want instant everything. It's the only time in history you can stand in front of a microwave oven and scream, hurry.
Right.
I mean, seriously.
30 seconds.
30 to heat my coffee? What the
Right,
heck?
right.
We have Keurigs instead of French presses.
Yep.
We want everything now. And our seniors don't function that way. They function very slow. And so they process slow, they move slow. And so for us, in our speedy world where everything's just zipping by, it clashes
Yeah.
with our world.
Right.
And so, and 20, 30 years ago, women were just really hitting the workforce hard.
Yes, right.
So we had a different mindset. We had more of, instead of the dual working family, we had that person that took care of the family,
Right.
and the person that provided. And now it's chaos because we're all having to provide, because it's just
24/7.
Yeah.
We're just on. Yeah.
We're just on because there's so much that you have to do to provide. And so, plus we have distance now.
Yes.
I
right.
grew up in a community where you were on a farm, and when you aged out of the house, you had a little piece of the farm.
That's right.
And then the next one had a little piece of the farm.
Yep.
And everybody lived together in
This
a community.
extended family,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. And so you were there as your loved ones were aging, as your grandparents were aging, and we moved grandparents in with us. And now, you live in California and they live in, Kentucky, Indiana. There's 2,500 miles between you.
Yeah.
The distance is there, the space is there, and then the whole time issue.
Yes. Right.
How do you give up working to go take care of mom, but I can't afford a caregiver because that's expensive too? They make more than my job does. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
And that's the dilemma.
And it's amazing how rapidly, just in 2 generations or 3 generations, boom, we're faced with this really significant issue. But you mentioned, working 2 jobs, and obviously at Relational, we often think of things as the employer, environment and the employee. And now whenever I go into a room or a meeting and I see somebody my age, I think, they more than likely have a parent or two parents that are kind of going through this. I mean, it's millions of people in my generation, our generation. From your perspective, what do you see? What are some of the struggles that you see in somebody trying to keep up their performance at work while doing caregiving, and the tension, between the employer and the employee?
So it's tough. It is very tough. So I employ professional caregivers. I own a caregiving agency, but they have their families to take care of too. Yeah. And they have their job, and oftentimes they also have their loved ones that they're caring for. And so the employers themselves have to recognize that we're no longer that mass-producing nation that we once were. Mm-hmm. We're now a nation of service. Mm-hmm. We went from agriculture to production to now we're a nation of service. So if we're going to be a nation of service, our employers have to be servant-hearted. Yep. Our employers have to recognize that we also are torn, and we have more obligation than we've ever had. Mm-hmm. We have more on our plates. We have more in front of us. More information. We're in an information download. You got half the world that's pissed off and depressed, and half the world that's going, yay, let's roll. And so you've got to, as an employer, step back and go, well, wait a minute. I'm dealing with people. Mm-hmm. I'm not dealing with machines. I'm dealing with people. And I think, while COVID, we talked about this, while COVID had so many bad aspects to it, some of the best things that came from COVID was our alternative work. Yeah, that little more flexibility. The flexibility and realizing that, you know what, working from home, I still have my productivity. Yep. We're still able to do things. We're giving them a little more family time, maybe shortening the work week and saying, you know what, I understand. Yep. I think employers have to almost become mini therapists. We're like the bartenders of the workforce at this point, and we have to be the ones that sit back and go, okay, life sucks, because guess what? When I get out of here, when I leave my desk, I'm going to go take care of mom or dad too. Right. And I wonder, I think, what I hear there is, increased flexibility and understanding from the employer would probably go, a long way. A long way. Especially with, someone's loyalty and engagement and all of that, if they feel like they're getting the hammer. And obviously understand different jobs have different demands and different requirements, but it does seem like just an awareness from the employer level. We've seen a huge growth in support for mental health services. Yes. So that's been fantastic. And I think this is another area of that where employers might be able to, maybe they could host, group meetings or make facilities available for people to, to be able to share some common experience, because like what we were talking about, we're it's not something that we're trained for. So our ability to share as much information as possible, I think, is really paramount here. Absolutely. We saw that kind of movement at one time when the women went into the workforce more and more and more, where employers put daycares inside their community, inside their workplace. And so we saw them catering to that. Well, now we have a sandwich generation. We have a generation of middle-aged adults in our age group where we're oftentimes still raising or taking care of kids at home. We're taking care of our jobs, but we've got these aging parents. Hey, what about a senior daycare inside of our workplaces? What about a place to bring mom or dad where they have a community place to come to because they can't be left alone? Yeah. What about giving us some of those options? We have to get out of the box. That's interesting. Yeah. We have to think outside of the box, because I call it a silver tsunami. It's hitting. Yes. There's day by day, minute by minute. Yeah, I don't know why everybody's like, wow, we've got a lot of aging people. Well, guess what? The boomers were born in the 60s. Right. And before. Yep. We knew they were going to age. We saw this coming. Right. Why didn't we plan? Because we live in today's world. And so we've got to think outside of the box to be able to take care of it and facilitate it. I was just saying, we have taken the cost of senior care to its maximum. Yes. Families can't afford what it costs. It's astronomical. It's astronomical. It has it's hit the space where only the elite can afford it. And And you know what? Everybody's aging. Everybody's getting older.
Yep.
Doesn't mean just rich people.
Right.
So we've got to figure out how do we help our middle class, even our upper middle class who can't afford, a 24/7 caregiver in a home right now. It's $24,000 a month.
I was going to say $250,000 a year,
250 grand.
Yeah, right. Wow.
Yeah. How many of you have that sitting in your back pockets
Yeah,
just
no,
waiting
thank you.
to take care of mom or dad?
And for a couple of years.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
$750,000 or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so unless you just sold a house here in Newport, you're not,
Yeah.
and you didn't owe anything on it and you just want to take it for that. It costs way too much. We have to think outside of the box. We have to come up with creative ways to provide quality care. And if we can't, then we have to empower our family members to provide the same and give them the time and the opportunity to do it.
Wow. Powerful stuff. So tell me a little bit about the vault. I've heard about the vault. What is the vault?
The vault. So the vault is a VIP room inside my website. My website is morethanheart.com. So just spell the words morethanheart.com. So there's this VIP room inside there, and in there is, under a learning tab, you can see I think there's 180, maybe 200 reels that are in there. You can see the full-length classes that I've done. We've done a master class on aging that's 4 hours of training.
Great.
We have a caregiving 101 that's about 2 hours. So all of that's included there inside that vault. But then outside of the learning side of it, there's a community. And it's like the old style AOL chat rooms where you
Yes,
can
right.
go in
Yeah.
and you can just say, hey, it's 2:00 in the morning.
Here's
and
what's up.
my mom just had another fall. I had to run over here. I've got to be at work at 6, and I just don't know how many more times I can do this. Is anybody else going through this? And somebody else can pop on, be it that day, be it later on, and say, you know what, I feel you. This is what I went through. This is what I did.
Yeah.
Or just, I'm with you.
Yep.
Just that
Yeah.
community. So that thing's like $30 a month for the membership, $300 for a year.
Love it.
And it gives you full access to anything and everything. You give me a copy of this podcast will be in there as well.
You got it.
Any of our videos, any of the interviews that we do, we throw them in so everybody has access to all the information.
Fantastic. So what I'm hearing is we give grace. We
Yes.
give grace to our parents, our loved ones, our siblings, ourselves.
Ourselves.
We find community.
Yes.
We talk to our employer about maybe having a little flexibility in the
Yes.
situation.
Yes.
And we find resources.
That's right.
And we do that at morethanheart.com.
That's right.
Okay. I love it. Well, Sam, thank you very much.
Thank you
Really
so much.
appreciate the time.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Thank you, Mike.